And we're good.
Okay, so we have representative government.
Representative government is generally interpreted to refer to a form of government where a legislature with significant decision-making power is freely elected. And it is also sometimes argued that representatives should reflect the social, gender, and composition of the electorate. There is a major difference between representative government and traditional representative government, in Greece and Rome. The big difference is that it isn't direct democracy, where the population is represented by a group of people who are elected to represent them, as opposed to in older democracies where people had to go represent themselves. For benefits and negatives of representative government, it allows for the population to voice its opinions, and it creates less dictatorships and creates safer nations. It gives equality to all citizens and creates freedom. It does take a longer time to make decisions, which can slow down the government process, and a poorly informed majority can make bad decisions potentially. Major powers changed to representative governments. The United States of America after the American Revolution, which was in 1776 to 1781, France after the French Revolution, which was in 1789, and England after the gain of power in the Parliament.
Okay, so this is about the English Parliament, and this picture here is the current monarch, and the Queen is in the middle, but they currently don't have any power. And this is what the Parliament looked like a long time ago. And basically, so England's change to representative democracy was more gradual. So basically, in the middle, that's King William and Queen Mary. And during the time that they were ruling, there was the Glorious Revolution, and that basically started the loss of power of the monarch. And there was the Bill of Rights that was passed that basically said that now the Parliament would have more power than the monarch, even though it was like a small portion of power. And then over time, more power was added to the Parliament. So the Great Reform Act of 1832 allowed more people to vote, so 300,000 men could now vote. And then in 1867, 2.7 million men could vote. And basically this was just a change from aristocracy. And then finally in 1911, the monarch was stripped from all its power, and so Parliament was now had all the power, and that was a complete change over to representative democracy. And then in 1918, all women could vote. The United States democracy was the first democracy to really first be a full democracy, even though England's Parliament was established a long time ago. The first picture is of the American Revolution, as you guys all probably know. And the next picture is of the American Congress. And the third picture is of George Washington, our first president, and was the leader of the Revolutionary War. So as we learned in some of the books we read this year, as England's power grew, they started having a lot of taxes on America's products, and this stopped the competitiveness of the American market in global world trade, and it also made it really expensive for America to buy products. So they decided to revolt, and they threw all the British tea into Boston Harbor. And after that, there was a series of battles. It started with Lexington and Concord, and it ended at the Battle of Yorktown, where the war was won. And then in 1776, the Declaration of Independence was written, which created the first real democracy. And also the Articles of Confederation went into effect. And in 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed, which was basically the end of the Revolutionary War. And so the United States had the first full democracy because of all of that. And this is basically just a picture of how today it works. So the Constitution, which has laws that apply to everybody, and then there's the legislative, executive, and judicial branch. And underneath that, in the executive, there's the president and vice president, which we elect. The Supreme Court, which helps to take on cases of law, and the legislative branch, which helps make the laws. And the House of Representatives and the Senate is also elected. So that's basically representative democracy in America. And then finally, there's the French government. So the first picture over here is the storming of Bastille, and that was the start of basically representative democracy in France. And then that's Napoleon Bonaparte, who during the Second Era was one of the main leaders. And the third picture is just them overthrowing the old monarchy. So basically there was financial difficulties, and King Louis XVI, he called a meeting, but everyone didn't want to really pay. So they started wanting freedom, and they wanted to force like representation of nobility. And so then there was like the first era that was started after the storming of the Bastille, which is basically like this armory, and it was a very large armory that the king owned and the state owned, and everyone was upset that they had so much power because he was putting them in so much financial debt. So they stormed it, and that was the start of that like Declaration of Rights and of Men, and that was the start of representative democracy in France. But it didn't really last that long because Napoleon Bonaparte took power, and he called himself an emperor. But the one good thing he did was he spread the ideas of the government, because he was a little bit less of a monarch than King Louis XVI, and eventually he was overruled, and that's when the third era started. But that fell after there was World War II, and then finally after World War II there was the final force, and they rebuilt the country, and they made France a leading power in economy, and that they basically became a leading force also in the European Union. And so now they have a large democracy, and they have a lot of power. And this is basically how it works. So they also have executive, legislative, and judicial branch, but instead they have a parliament and a prime minister instead of a president in Congress. So it's a little bit different. And then finally, India, which has the largest democracy. So on this side, this is Mahatma Gandhi, and then in the middle is Nehru, and this is Manmohan Singh, who is the current prime minister. And so Gandhi basically was the start of India's democracy, and he protested a lot, and he basically helped unite Hinduism and other religions in the court so that they could fight against British power. And after they won, Nehru was the first one to really start democracy in India. He became the first prime minister, and he was kind of like, because he was the next one after Mahatma Gandhi. And he helped establish democracy throughout India, and now it has the largest of them all.
So all these different representative governments have some similarities and differences, although they're all relatively similar since they're based on the same idea, that being representative government. The Parliament of the United Kingdom, the French Parliament, and the United States Congress are all the legislative branches that control our governments. The Parliament of the UK has an upper house and a lower house. The French Parliament has a Senate and a National Assembly, and Congress has the Senate and the House of Representatives. And so all three of those different legislative branches are bicameral, which means that they're all separated into different levels and houses. India, the UK, and France all have parliaments and prime ministers, and the United States is a little bit different because we have the president and Congress, but again, conceptually they're very similar. The differences: the Parliament of the United Kingdom is the oldest of the three legislative branches, and the French Parliament is the newest. In the Parliament of the United Kingdom, members of the House of Lords are appointed, not elected, which is different than in the United States and France, where everybody is elected. And in the French Parliament, the Senate and National Assembly meet in different buildings, which is unlike the English Parliament, or the English Parliament and United States Congress. And this is just a big list of current representative governments, and you can read all of them, but there are quite a few since it's kind of becoming a more and more common thing across the globe. There are a couple big ones that are highlighted in red. And here's our big guy.
And this one. Yeah, just one. But also, just about the bicameral thing, it actually means that, it's a majority vote, so that's what he was talking about, where a large similarity is for the representative democracy. It's by majority that laws are passed, and then, but it's all divided, like the different places of the laws.
Hold on, 1 second. Can you bring it back to that list of countries that are democratic? 1 second.